organizers of this conference so much for inviting me. I'm deeply honored to be here. And thank you for saying 입양인. I really appreciate that. She's using the term adopted adult when she's speaking Korean instead of saying adopted child. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, so I know the worst thing to do is to stick your head in your book and read from the book, but I have a cold, and so I'm really worried that if I don't do that, I'm going to babble incoherently, so I'm going to do it. But I just wanted to say that I love to see the title novelist next to my name. I feel so cool. And I know there's a reason why in Korea they say that I'm a novelist, but I've actually never written a novel. I don't write fiction. I write creative nonfiction. And in the United States, we have a clear line between novels, which are made up, and nonfiction, which is not made up. And so the point of my talk is that this is true. Okay, oh, I'm so nervous. Okay. When I published my first book, one of the staff at the publishing house told me there are only two stories. One, a stranger comes to town, or two, the hometown person leaves town. So indeed, those are the two stories that I wrote. The first was The Language of Blood, and that was a memoir about being adopted from Korea by a white family and growing up as a racial minority in rural Minnesota in the United States. I was the Korean stranger who came to the Americans' dinner table. The second story is also a memoir, Fugitive Visions, and it's the story of me leaving my home in the US and coming back to Korea to start my life again. At the age of 32, I finally lived in a place as part of the racial majority, but I was a cultural minority. And I still live here. 15 years on, I still live here, and kind of ironically, I'm still diaspora, even though I'm here. So, what I learned from publishing my personal stories after a lifetime of not being believed by my own family is that when something is in book form, people believe you. I'm both happy and sad when I hear from adoptees that they have bought one of these books and have given it to their parents. I feel happy because they found something to like in the book and can relate to it on a personal level through their own experience. But I'm sad, too, because this adoptee needed to give a book that a stranger wrote to their parents so their parents would believe them. Why couldn't their parents listen to them before? Why do we need a book to show their parents that their feelings are normal? Or why was it impossible for the adoptee to tell their parents about their feelings before? The main distinction between adoptees such as myself and other diasporic Koreans in the US, China, Japan, Latin America, Eastern Europe, or anywhere in the world is that transracial adoptees were sent by adoption agencies such as Holt, and we are usually ethnic minorities not only within our adoptive countries, but also in our own adoptive families. We are the other at the dinner table in our own homes, which Astrid pointed out earlier this morning. We are so extremely isolated, and we are so lonely, and we don't even know it until the loneliness stops. And it is not just the Koreans adopted overseas who experience this. The Language of Blood was supported very well by the first publisher, who sent me on a book tour around the United States. I expected to see Korean faces and white faces at the readings, but everywhere I went, I saw people of other ethnicities too, sitting there nodding and reading and crying, and at the book signing tables, they told me their own stories. I found out they were also transracially adopted. All of these black, brown, yellow faces from all over the world were raised by white people. What was going on here? I wanted to find out, so my friend who was living in Minneapolis, Sun Young Shin, who's sitting right there, and she is an internationally adopted Korean, and she grew up with a white family in Chicago, and Julia Chinere Opera, who is a domestically adopted person whose father was a Nigerian, and she grew up in the UK. We three collected manuscripts that examined transracial adoption. These non-white adoptees were comprised of those who were sent from the global South and Asia to relatively wealthier white families in the US and Europe, as well as children of color domestically adopted to white families. So as adoptees, we had routinely been told by majority people that given the terrible circumstances of our births, adoption was the best option for us. We wondered, is that really true? We found out it wasn't. From the preface of the anthology Outsiders Within, we wrote, how would the proposed remedies change if we asked about the right of low-income parents to receive adequate economic support to keep their children? the right of women with addictions to receive treatment and continue their parental roles, or the right of children not to have their mothers taken away and put behind bars? How would the debate alter if we considered the right of mothers in the global south, a nation surviving the aftermath of war, to food, housing, healthcare, and education for themselves and their children? The contributors reveal transracial adoption as the intimate face of colonization, racism, militarism, imperialism, and globalization. In doing so, they direct our attention to the need for long-term solutions embedded in struggles for economic, racial, and global justice that address the root causes leading to children of color being removed from their families or surrendered for adoption. They call on us to demand justice for an entire community rather than claiming to save a single child. The real alternative is found in welfare policies that support poor mothers of color rather than penalizing them, criminal justice policies that strengthen and heal communities rather than destroying them, and international policies that prioritize human security over profits. This complex web of narratives about loss, love, belonging, alienation, home, and exile deeply enriches our understanding, not only of transracial adoption, but also of the dynamics of race, politics, and the global economy that shape all of our lives. And Sun Young is always asking me when we're going to do Outsiders Within second edition. I'm like, oh, that's so painful. I mean, that would just be really painful. I mean, it was an important book, but editing that was the most depressing thing ever. But, we found some hope in the bottom of the barrel there. Okay, see, now I'm babbling incoherently. Back to the text. At this conference, we are talking about peace. We hear the phrase peace talks, but shouldn't we have peace listening first? How can people who do not even listen to their own children become capable of listening on a global scale? Can adoptees, through literature, compel the majority to listen to minorities? Will the majority extend their empathy to listen not just to adoptees' personal stories, but also the stories of their mothers and the societies that they came from? In my experience as an activist in Korea in the adoption child rights field, I found out that nothing happens without documentation. Again, it's not real, and nobody cares or believes you until it's written down. If we write it down, it becomes an article in the newspaper. Then it becomes something that can be quoted in a scholarly text. A verbal complaint, once written down, can become a document that lawyers can use. A petition that is typed can change laws. That's the power of writing. Sometimes it's not even really writing, it's just typing. But writing it down creates belief. It makes people listen. My heart has never ached so much as it did for the Korean mother I met whose child was sent overseas without her knowledge or permission in the 1970s. She was illiterate, and she is never going to be real to anyone in power because she can't write down what happened to her. She is still illiterate, so much that she cannot read her own child's birth registration. She cannot call me on the phone. I can only call her. She cannot travel alone, even in Korea, because how would she read the signs? She's working on Jeju Island doing simple farm labor along Chinese migrants. She knows everything about growing tangerines, but has none of the skills that could keep her children safely with her in the face of poverty, abuse, and patriarchy wielded by men and women. I call her Jeongjun's mom because Jeongjun was an adoptee I loved, and his eternal spirit is my ongoing connection to his mother, this woman who is so profoundly exploitable. Jeongjun's mom never existed to you until this moment, and this miracle of manifestation is what we do as writers. It's not that we make things real. Things are already real. It's not that we give people voice. People have their own voices already. What we do is ask powerful people, literate people, to peek into a small reality of one corner of the world where they've never bothered to look before. Showing, arranging, rearranging, typing, creating a mosaic from broken and discarded lives. This has been my work as a perpetual minority, with each foot set precariously in a different world. From this space in the margins of life, the natural habitat of the outsider within, may I be an instrument of understanding and peace.